Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into a tense and dramatic incident that unfolded between China and the United States. The event in question centers around a U.S. military helicopter and a Chinese challenge that turned out to be a significant mistake. This incident is not just about a single confrontation in the air, but about the wider geopolitical tensions that continue to escalate between two of the world's most powerful nations. It highlights the risks, the strategies, and the message both sides are trying to send not only to each other, but also to the international community watching closely. The South China Sea and nearby regions have long been flashpoints of contention. China has made sweeping territorial claims, backed them up with military bases on artificial islands, and has consistently tried to project its power over the air and sea routes in the region. On the other hand, the United States has maintained freedom of navigation operations and conducted routine flights and patrols to challenge those claims. In this volatile environment, even a single encounter between aircraft or ships can quickly spiral into a diplomatic storm. The specific incident began when a U.S. helicopter was carrying out a routine flight, which Washington described as part of its legal right to operate in international airspace. For China, however, this was seen as a deliberate intrusion into what they claimed to be their territory. Chinese authorities issued warnings, both through radio communication and through the presence of their own aircraft, demanding that the helicopter change course. This was the beginning of a dangerous standoff in the skies. The U.S. helicopter, trained and prepared for such encounters, did not back down. Instead, it continued on its designated path, maintaining calm professionalism while acknowledging the warnings. For American forces, the goal was clear: to demonstrate that international law allows them to fly in these areas and that they would not be intimidated by Chinese threats. For the Chinese pilots and ground commanders monitoring the situation, this refusal to comply was a direct challenge to their authority and claims. What happened next is what turned the incident into a big mistake on China's part. In their attempt to intimidate, Chinese aircraft moved dangerously close to the U.S. helicopter, cutting across its flight path in a highly unsafe maneuver. Such actions are considered reckless and risky, especially when dealing with military aircraft operating at high speeds and in contested airspace. Instead of forcing the American helicopter to retreat, this behavior only strengthened the U.S. position and highlighted China's aggression to the rest of the world. The U.S. military quickly documented the incident, releasing statements and sharing information with allies and partners. This transparency turned the situation against China. What Beijing might have hoped would be a show of strength instead became an example of unsafe and provocative behavior. Countries in the region, already concerned about China's growing military presence, saw this as further proof that Beijing was willing to escalate tensions without regard for international safety. The global response mattered greatly. Nations like Japan, Australia, and members of ASEAN have long been wary of China's activities in the South China Sea. By challenging a U.S. helicopter in such an aggressive manner, China only reinforced the perception that it was acting as a bully. Meanwhile, the U.S. gained diplomatic support for its continued presence in the region. The mistake was not simply the maneuver in the air, but the broader strategic miscalculation. By overreacting, China undermined its own position. For the United States, the lesson was clear, and the message was firm. American aircraft, whether helicopters, surveillance planes, or patrols, would continue to operate wherever international law allows. They would not be forced into submission by threats or unsafe actions. The professionalism of the U.S. crew contrasted sharply with the risky moves by the Chinese pilots, and that comparison resonated strongly in discussions about responsibility and stability in the region. The incident also ties into the bigger picture of U.S.-China relations. Military encounters like this are becoming more frequent as both sides increase their presence. For China, these actions are meant to signal resolve and control, but for the U.S. and its allies, they come across as hostile and destabilizing. Every mistake, Every dangerous maneuver pushes more countries to align with the United States for security assurances. What might look like strength in the moment can end up isolating China diplomatically in the long run. The helicopter challenge also reflects the broader competition between the two nations. It is not only about territory, but about influence, credibility, and the balance of power in Asia. The United States seeks to reassure its allies that it will remain committed to the region, while China seeks to push the U.S. further away. However, incidents like this one show that aggressive challenges often backfire. Instead of deterring U.S. presence, they justify and even expand it. From a military perspective, the situation highlights the discipline of American forces. Pilots and crews are trained to remain steady under pressure, to avoid unnecessary escalation, and to keep their mission objectives clear. The Chinese approach, by contrast, risked creating an accident that could have had severe consequences. A collision in midair could have triggered a much larger crisis, potentially even a military confrontation neither side truly wants. That risk underscores why this was such a dangerous mistake. International law also plays a key role here. The U.S. bases its operations on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which defines international airspace and maritime rights, while China interprets the law differently to justify its expansive claims. The majority of the world rejects those interpretations. By challenging the U.S. helicopter, China was essentially challenging global norms, and the reaction it received showed just how isolated that position is becoming. For observers around the world, this incident is a reminder of how close the world sometimes comes to serious conflict. A single aggressive move, a single miscalculation, could have led to a disaster. It also shows the importance of restraint and professionalism in military operations. The fact that the U.S. helicopter did not respond aggressively but simply held its course prevented the situation from spiraling further. In this way, the U.S. demonstrated both strength and responsibility, while China appeared reckless. Looking ahead, incidents like these are likely to continue. The South China Sea remains one of the most contested and militarized regions on the planet. As long as China continues to assert control and the United States continues to uphold freedom of navigation, their forces will encounter each other. Each time there is a risk of escalation, but there is also an opportunity for the world to see which side is acting responsibly. In the end, China's challenge against the U.S. helicopter was a big mistake because it failed to achieve its goal. Instead of forcing the U.S. to back down, it exposed China's willingness to take reckless risks. Instead of demonstrating strength, it highlighted weakness in strategy and judgment. And instead of intimidating the world, it reminded nations why they value the U.S. presence in the region as a stabilizing force. This incident will not be the last, but it will stand as an example of how aggressive posturing can backfire. For the United States, it reinforced a commitment to stand firm, and for China, it was a lesson that every challenge carries risks. The skies above contested waters are a dangerous arena, and every move is watched closely. What happened here was not just about one helicopter. It was about the future of power and stability in the Asia-Pacific region.